Guys, how's it going? It's Jeff. I'm finally gonna do the one video that I've been asked to do, and tell you who I am, tell you my story, my testimony, basically. So obviously, my name's Jeff. I just go to where it begins. I was born in January 24th, 1986. Okay, I'm not really gonna go that far back. Let's just go back to my 6th grade year. In 6th grade is when my parents got, my 6th, 7th grade is when my parents got divorced. And obviously that's hard on any kid. And, you know, to deal with that, it's not easy. And I did the go back and forth between your parents. My dad eventually got married again. So did my mom. And I love my stepmom and my stepdad very much. My dad moved to Oakdale for a little bit, and that's after meeting my stepmom. We started going back to River Oak Grace Community Church. We went there a long time ago when I was a kid, and then we stopped going for a while, and we decided to start going back there, and it was awesome. It was awesome going to River Oak Grace and being part of the youth group. And I know, you know, and like your typical high school person that has to deal with their parents' divorce, it was tough, you know, because I was that person that was back and forth between the two. And I think it was my sophomore or junior year I decided to just move in with my dad. And they moved to Escalon, so it wasn't too bad to do that. The reasons weren't exactly the reasons that they should have been, but I did make the choice to move in with my dad. So in 2000, I think I was at youth for maybe a few months before Chad asked me if I wanted to start doing sound, running the soundboard and stuff like that for worship and doing the slideshows and stuff. So of course I said yes. My first night concert, it was crazy. Fast forward to 2003, I was up at Hume Lake with our youth group, and Chad put a video camera in my hand and said, "Hey, do you want to make the highlight videos for the week and do the other videos that we do at church?" I said, "Of course." And obviously I've kept doing that ever since. And in 2003 is when I started being a youth staff for junior high youth. And then in 2004, after I graduated and after the summer, I started doing high school staff also, because I set up and tore down things. I actually worked for Chad and River Oak Grace, and I in 2004 was a camp counselor for when we went to Hume Lake, and that was one of the greatest experiences ever. And I graduated in 2004. I remember telling Chad I wanted to be an intern. I think it was in probably 2004 when I graduated, and I didn't get to be one that year. But in 2005, I remember I was walking through the MJC campus, because I started going to MJC, and my major was radio broadcasting, and I minored in film. He called me and said, "Do you still want to be an intern?" And I said, "Of course I do." I'm like, I'm still on staff, and I love serving the youth ministry. So in 2005, I became an intern under Chad, a paid intern, which did not matter. I just love serving youth and doing all that stuff. So did the internship, was a camp counselor up at Hume Lake again, but this time for the high schoolers, which amazing. Being on the youth staff was the greatest thing ever, and serving in the youth ministry was awesome. And just knowing that I had a part in a lot of students' lives and being there for them and helping them was awesome. And then in 2006, after the internship was over, I got a job working at Galaxy Theater. And then in working that job, I was the head of maintenance and I was still serving at River Oak Grace, doing youth, playing bass, doing sound, doing videos. I loved it. I was starting to teach students how to do sound, starting to teach some of them how to do video, and it was great. It's one of the best things ever. And in 2006, I also met, her name's Jolene, and she ended up becoming my girlfriend. And I remember, I think it was a few months into us dating, we started sleeping together. And that's just the nice way of putting it. We started having sex. I remember Chad asked me about that once, and I told him that yes, we had sex. And I wish I didn't have to say that. He told me he wasn't going to ask me to leave youth staff. He asked me to stop. And if I couldn't stop that, then he would have to ask me to leave. So we stopped. Stopped for, I think, about 3 months. We stopped having sex for about 3 months, and then started again. And I knew that I couldn't continue serving God and serving at the youth and serving at River Oak Grace if I was doing that. So I left on my own in 2007. I quit working for Chad. I quit working at River Oak Grace. I chose her over everything else. And horrible choice. Horrible choice. I had the choice of choose her or choose God. I chose her. I put her in the God spot. So, yeah, and I'll tell you right now, that leads to all kinds of trouble. Even sex before marriage leads to all kinds of trouble, because once you've gone down that road, it's like it's like drugs. Once you've gone down the road of drugs, you want more, and you don't want to stop. And and during the whole time of me living that way, making the wrong choice, I had friends from the church and people that loved me telling me that I needed to stop, that I needed to turn back to God and come back to doing what I was doing before. Just like in Revelation, return to your first love. Jesus tells the church, return to your first love. Well, I didn't. I forsook everybody, and there were a few friends that stuck by my side throughout the whole thing. Me being stupid, me making my mistakes, me sinning and choosing the wrong thing. And seriously, I love you guys. Thank you for always being by my side. And you know who you are. We got married and on May 5th, 2007. Because I knew I couldn't keep living that way. Something inside me said that I couldn't keep living that way and feel right about it. So I asked her to marry me. I was going to make it right. And I remember we went to Chad and asked him if he would do our wedding, and he said only if we stop having sex, and because I did move in with her too, and he said you have to move out. One of you has to move out. And we weren't willing to do that. We went to her youth pastor, and same thing. But she held it against River Oak Grace and Chad, which sucked, because when we did get married, we went to Tahoe because we had all these circumstances that just weren't adding up, which should have been the sign that we should have never been married. But being blinded by love and wanting to do my own thing, I didn't see it. After we got married, I started coming back to River Oak Grace, and I remember I went back. It was like Halloween. They were doing the Halloween alternative, and I started helping because I asked, do you guys need some help? So I started helping, and Chad was like, yeah, go for it. We could use all the help possible. So I did. All throughout that time, coming back to River Oak Grace and trying to get her to come with me, and she would only come every now and then. And there was something in me just didn't feel right. Didn't feel like I was living right still. And I didn't know what it was. And I remember talking to her, and she kept telling me how she just didn't like River Oak Grace and that she wanted to find a different church. And me not willing at the time. And then at some point I decided, okay, well, I want to go to church with you. I want to do what's right and be the right spiritual leader. Ends up I was a little too late. In November of 2008, she had decided to cheat on me twice with different people. And the first one she told me about, I told her, we can work past it. I can forgive you and we can work it out. And then the week after, she went to a party and slept with another person again. And this time it was different because I found out before it had happened. And I tried to stop it, but I was at work. I couldn't leave, or I was told I'd be fired if I did. So I could have, but I wouldn't have had the job anymore. And plus I didn't know where she was. I knew it was in Oakdale, but I didn't know where. And so I remember I tried calling her, and I called her friend's phone, and finally her friend said that she had been making out with this guy throughout the night. And then I remember I told her, put her on the phone, and every time she'd give the phone to her, she'd hang up. And the last time, I'm going to be very blunt here, the last time that I got her on the phone, she said, "F him, it's over." Hardest thing I've ever heard. I remember I broke down. That was that's the hardest time of my life I've ever dealt with. My wife, my life, just throwing it all away because she didn't want to be married anymore. The reality is I threw my life away when I chose her over God, but I didn't think this would happen. I didn't think she would do that. And that's one of those things that you don't see coming. You just don't see it coming. After I found out where she was, I actually drove to where she was. I remember she came outside and you could tell she had partied and gotten drunk. So she told me that yes, it was over, to my face, and she told me she was going to tell me about this and that she wished I didn't find out the way I did. So I went home. I remember an hour later after I got home, and it was probably like 8:30, she came waltzing through the door. And I followed her into our bedroom and telling her, we need to talk. We have to talk about this. We need to talk about what's going on. And she was getting in the shower and almost acting like as if it wasn't even a big deal. And she knew it was, but she's just acting like it. So I remember I broke down so many different times. I remember my dad called me. I said, you know what, I'm going to try and work this out with her. I'm going to try and forgive her, make it right. Because God re-got my attention at that, by that time. I was like, okay, I was in my Bible. I was going back to church. And even the day before, actually that day, the day she came home, we were supposed to go to Mill Creek Church. We were going to try out Mill Creek and see how it was because I know the pastor. And of course all that happened and we didn't go, but I was in the bathroom crying, and she came in and she held me and said that she wanted to work it out. And of course me being ecstatic, going, yes, she wants to work it out with me. She wants to stay together. She wants to stay married. So I remember I called my dad and told him, we're going to work it out. I'm going to forgive her and we're going to stay married. And then the next day comes and she said she was going to go to the coffee shop and talk to her friend Kenny. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Because, I thought that for sure things were going to be okay. That we would go to counseling or something and we could work things out. And she came home. Didn't wave, didn't do nothing. Didn't acknowledge me. And I thought that was weird. So I finished I put the stuff away. I closed up the truck and I went upstairs to our apartment and I walked in our room and she was packing. She said she was done. She didn't want to be married anymore. and that she had only told me we were going to work things out so I'd stop crying, because apparently I was annoying her with all my crying. So she left that day, packed up some of her stuff and left. A few months go by, and I remember we stayed friends because I told her, you know what, I can forgive you. We can work this out. We can be friends. And of course, she didn't want to work it out. She still didn't want to be married. Did everything for her. I gave up my entire life to be with her. I gave up God to be with her. Hey, let me just tell you right now, if you're in a situation where you're willing to give God up for something, you better give up that something and give your life to God, because it can ruin you in the end. So, and to continue, we were friends, we were doing stuff like that. She eventually got a boyfriend. We were still married, but separated. She got a boyfriend, and I remember that I got a text from an ex-girlfriend, and she had told me that she still loved me and stuff, and this was from a girl who I originally thought I was going to marry. So we started talking again, and eventually started dating again, and I, of course, made the exact same mistake again. Started having sex with her and just living to make her happy and to try and fulfill some sort of physical pleasure in my life. I was trying to fill the void of my life with things that I shouldn't have been trying to fill it with. I should have been trying to fill it with God and serving Christ and living with Christ in my life. Instead, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this instead, because the God thing ain't working right now. Because for a little bit there, for about 3 months, I was like, okay, God, you have a purpose in this. You have a plan. You're gonna work it out. You're gonna do something. And after 3 months, I gave up and went back to doing what I wanted to do. And of course, that bombshelled too. Ended up breaking up with her. I've dated her like 4 different times now. We've been engaged twice, and it never works out. And I finally figured out why. Because I was so desperate to not be alone that I would move too fast, and it would ruin everything. I remember I kept, for 2 years, trying to win Jolene back. It was 2 years I was single and trying to win her back and save my marriage, because we weren't divorced yet. We were still just separated. I ended up moving to Sonora to live with my uncle because rent was cheap. And I remember one night I watched Fireproof. I was watching Fireproof, and after it was over, of course, I broke down crying because it's an awesome story. But it also made me wish that was what I had, that we were able to reconcile. I remember I went out back and we had a fire pit and made a fire. And sitting by the fire just looking out at the stars, because up in Sonora you can see every single star. It's awesome. You can see everything. I'm just looking out and I'm like, all right, God, I got to give it to you. And I gave up. I gave up everything right there. I said, it's you. You need to take it. And I remember I started seeking some mentoring from Chad, and then some other people, talking to Gary Brightman about things and doing all that stuff, and trying to get things worked out and getting my way back into being what God wants me to be. The divorce went through finally in 2011, so I've only been divorced officially for a year. And that's kind of like the main story, but here's the part that I really want you to hear. It's one that I know I've made mistakes. I know I chose the wrong thing. I know I chose the wrong person. The whole time I should have chosen God, and I didn't. And now, every day, I strive to be what Christ wants me to be. I strive to follow Christ to the best of my ability. And I try to give my life up to Him every day, because without Christ in my life, living it for me, I can't make it. You know, it's like every day that I don't pray before I get out of bed, asking Him to take my life and use it to the way He wants it, I end up not being right that day. I don't do what I think I should be doing. You know, I'll struggle. I struggle still. I mean, who doesn't? Everybody struggles with something. Everybody has a struggle in their life, and we all deal with adverse circumstances. And my circumstances were, you know, chose the wrong thing, got married and got divorced, screwed up a little bit more, and will end up messing up again, just hopefully not in the same ways. Hopefully it'll be a little more minor. I don't plan on messing up, but it's gonna happen. And so, you know, I've made so many mistakes. I've done so many things that I never planned, I never thought I'd do. And through it all, God's been like, hey, I'm still here. I'm waiting for you. My arms are wide open waiting for you. I quite literally did the prodigal son thing. I walked away. I hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom, and you're gonna hear that story in another video, but I hit rock bottom. And I don't want to hit rock bottom again. I know if I do, God's right there waiting for me. Like, I was down in a pit, and Jesus didn't just give me His hand to pull me out. He got down in the pit with me, and He pushed me out of it and took my place, just like He did on the cross. Jesus took all the stuff that I have done. He took it. He got nailed to the cross along with my sin, took the penalty for it, and says, hey, I'm still alive, because He died and then He rose, and right now He's standing there telling me, hey, I'm right here with you. I'm never going to leave you, and never will I forsake you. I'm with you even to the end of the age. He's like, and I am coming back. And until I do, I want you to walk with me. I want you to live for me. Guys, that's what I want to do. And I know what he's calling me towards. And it's to continue doing Undying Media, these videos. Where I do sermon videos, or just reading the Bible, or now my testimony, letting you know who I am, what I've done, and what I've been through. And there's parts that I still haven't talked about, but I'm gonna. Guys, God's calling me towards youth ministry and young adult ministry. That's why I do the videos. That's why Undying Media Ministry. The purpose statement for Undying Media is waging war against the world to save the souls of the generation. You know, we live in a generation that's all technology. I want to reach those that would necessarily not ever be in a church. But God uses me in my weakness. God uses me in my struggles. God uses me in circumstances, and He can and does do the same thing for you. Just like Gideon in the Bible, God worked in him and through him simultaneously. So, I mean, I know some of you are believers, some of you already know who I am, and you've heard this story before. But you had no idea what God was going to do through that. And one of the greatest things about what God's doing with what I've been through and what I've done, He's turning it and making it so I can help people and warn people. Help people that are dealing with sex before marriage, that are dealing with divorce, or have been through their own divorce, have been through a parent's divorce, to deal with a death, because my mother-in-law died, I think it was 6 months after we split, or maybe a year after we split. And also to be able to deal with anxiety and suicide. And yeah, you're going to hear about that in another video, so stay tuned for those. But guys, just because you've done some messed up stuff in your life, just because you've chosen the wrong things, doesn't mean God has left you or God's forsaken you. He's told you He won't leave you. Even if you're not a believer, He's right there waiting for you. His arms are wide open. You're not just looking for Him. He's been chasing you and waiting for you. You may not be a believer, you may be skeptical. I guarantee if you weigh it out and you look hard enough and you open up your heart, God will find you, and because He's right there waiting. Okay, just like the prodigal son. Prodigal son took off, did what he wanted to do, and realized that he was way better off when he was with his father. And that's what happened to me. I realized I was way better off with God. And though I may struggle, and though I'm weak, God's with me and working through me and in me through all those things. See, the prodigal son's father was stood, waiting, watching. God is pursuing, waiting, watching for you to return, for you to turn from what you're doing, if you are doing things that you know are against what God has called you to do. But when he saw the son coming, he ran to him, threw his arms around him with the mess, the muck, everything that was on the son, the filth, everything, threw his arms around him and kissed him and welcomed him back. That's what God's waiting for you. God's ready to run to you and throw his arms around you and accept you as if you haven't done anything wrong. Guys, be encouraged by my story. Learn from my story. Turn your life over to Christ. So here's the one thing that people don't ever want to tell you, and more people should. Christ knew you were worth dying for. Thanks for listening, guys.
I'm not just one man, all heaven stands with me. I've got a message for the world, it's not just us.